Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
Okay, Thursday is round one of the NFL draft. We all know that with the giant news here on Wednesday that James Hurst is retiring. The Saints' biggest need has been even further exacerbated there on the offensive line. But when Mickey Loomis met with reporters on Tuesday, he was pressed a little about Marshon Lattimore. So if you remember earlier in the offseason, he was a little nondescript when asked about Lattimore's future, and it led a lot of people to believe Lattimore might be on the trade block. Well, Mickey Loomis was asked point blank here about Lattimore being on the roster. Give a listen.
Mickey, do you feel like pretty confident that Marshon Lattimore is going to be on this roster this year?
Yeah.
Okay, that was Mike Triplett asking the question, and not at all. Well, he was asked to further elaborate, and kind of was asked, is Lattimore even tradable? Yeah, give a listen.
Everybody's tradable. Just depends on, the offer that you get, right? And yet, it's not very common. I'm not one who likes to do a lot of trades. I don't like trading players that have been contributors for us. I like, maximizing our roster with the guys we got. But we've made trades before, so.
Look, yes, there have been some pretty sort of infamous trades, trading Jimmy Graham to Seattle. Yes, it happens, but they're few and far between. But as far as maximizing your roster, there's been times the Saints have missed. Look, I'm looking at Twitter right now, and Adam Schefter just tweeted that Trey Hendrickson is requesting a trade from Cincinnati. He's due to make $15 million this season. He wants more long-term security to be paid requisite to his production, which he certainly deserves. But that's a guy the Saints chose not to pay because they committed resources to Alvin Kamara and Ryan Ramczyk and Marshon Lattimore and saw guys like Trey Hendrickson and Marcus Williams walk out the door. So, yes, I can understand where Mickey Loomis is coming from on maximizing your roster, but also you have to look at tradability with respect to the contract. And when you look at Marshon Lattimore right now, his his cap hit next year is $31 million. The dead number is $20 million. So you could off-ramp off of Lattimore's deal after this season. It's still going to cost you a lot, but you have decisions to make about Lattimore after this season. But even still, Lattimore's cap number this year is 14. His dead cap number is 31. So he's not tradable this year because you can't afford to trade him this year. Essentially, him being on, I'm oversimplifying, but Lattimore being on your roster costs you $14.6 million. If he wasn't on your roster, it would cost you $31 million. So it would cost you more not to have Lattimore on your team than to have him. But I don't even think Lattimore really is the question here. I think the question about the Saints cornerback and how they may approach it this year is about Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. Paulson Adebo, for example, is entering the final year of his rookie contract. Typically, when you see teams extend their players, they do so before they go into the final year of their deal because you don't want them. It's the balancing act that you play. It's the chance you take. Do you take Paulson Adebo and say, we're going to sign you now to an extension? Because if he plays out his fourth year, has a great year, then he hits unrestricted free agency, and now you're in a bidding war for your own player. You sign him now, you avoid that bidding war, and potentially if he has the boom season. The flip side of it is, what if he doesn't perform as well this year? Now, the player, too, can say, I'm going to go play out this fourth year, see how I do, and then test my market. So those are the conversations that are had. But the fact that the Saints haven't yet extended Paulson Adebo tells you that they're not sure what they want to do with Paulson Adebo. And the same, to a degree, is going to be true with Alontae Taylor. Because Alontae Taylor is in his third year, but you'll be having the same entering his third year, but you're going to be having the same conversation about Alontae Taylor next offseason. So if you're the Saints, you go into this draft not necessarily with a giant need at cornerback because you've got Lattimore, Adebo, and Alontae Taylor all under contract. So in theory, anybody else that you sign is a special teamer, backup, rotational piece. You're not necessarily looking for someone to be a starter or main contributor. But for New Orleans, I think you approach it from the context of, are you starting to think for next year now? Because if you go use a high draft pick this year on a cornerback or somewhere to draft a corner, in some way you're thinking in your conscious about what your future looks like without one of the three guys that I just mentioned next year. Either do you off-ramp off of Marshon Lattimore after this year? Do you not extend Paulson Adebo? Does he walk in free agency? Are you planning on not extending Alontae Taylor next year, which means you're planning for that inevitability now? Those are the kinds of conversations that the Saints are going to have with respect to the cornerback position in this draft this year. So I don't know that the Saints take a cornerback, but when I look at some of these mock drafts that have the Saints taking a corner, it makes sense because all three of your top three guys all have a very uncertain future in New Orleans after this season. So yes, while offensive line is clearly your biggest need, you've got to replace Michael Thomas. You have an immediate need at receiver behind Olave and Rashid Shaheed. And yes, you signed Cedric Wilson this offseason, but I'm talking about the immediate need that you have. You need depth at interior defensive line. You could use depth at safety. Those are all greater immediate needs that New Orleans has today. But if they do look at cornerback, they're looking at cornerback with an eye on what it's going to, in preparing for the inevitability of after the season not having one of those top three guys. But Mickey Loomis and his staff will be there in the draft room on Thursday, and we'll get a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a great look at what the future of the Saints organization is going to be. It's one of the reasons I love the draft. I love the draft so much, and yes, there is there's always the uncertainty about how the process goes. I mean, everyone thinks you hit on every draft pick, and sometimes you never know. I mean, I tell the story all the time, like, there's two players the Saints drafted. I can name three right off the top of my head that when they made the pick, like, I had no concept of what they were doing that hit. One was Thomas Morstead. The Saints traded up into round 5 to take a punter. And we talked about it on air, the Saints had to be the only franchise in the NFL that would trade up in the draft to take a punter. And Morstead became your punter for a decade. Alvin Kamara was one of those. In that it was the same offseason where the Saints signed Adrian Peterson. You had Mark Ingram, you signed Adrian Peterson, and then you trade up to take a running back. Why would you trade up to take a running back when you had Ingram and you had just signed Adrian Peterson? Well, clearly Kamara became one of the best offensive weapons in the NFL at the early part of his career. And then the other was Ryan Ramczyk. You got that first-round pick in the Brandon Cooks trade with New England. You sent a former first-round pick receiver to New England. You got a first-round pick, and you used it on an offensive tackle when you had Teron Armstead and Zach Strief. You didn't need a tackle. Well, Strief got hurt. Ramczyk became the starter, became an all-pro, and as we say, the rest is history. So, sometimes you go into a draft, you come out of a draft wondering what in the world did you do, and it works. Sometimes the opposite is also true, where you think you nailed the pick, and it becomes a flop. I mean, Trevor Penning is a great example of that. It made so much sense when they took Penning, why they took him, and what it looked like his future in New Orleans is going to be, and it just flat hasn't worked to this point. So it all starts on Thursday. It's one of the reasons, all the uncertainty, but the optimism that abounds that surrounds the draft is one of the reasons it's always so interesting and so entertaining. We'll be locked in.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.